will be the one to crush your head. That is Christ. And that's what I like about this image right here. Because here's an anthropomorphic view of God the Father talking to Adam and Eve in the caveman clothes. And what he's doing is pronouncing judgment to the serpent. And what he's saying is that this is the woman whose seed will crush your head. So it's alluding to both the Blessed Mother and Jesus. And it is through her seed, not through man's seed, not man, not Adam, not any human male. It's through her offspring, her seed, that would crush the serpent's head.
That's very enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah. It is something that's very opening, because when you look at it, in English, it doesn't quite have the impact as you would if you read it in Latin, for example, or even in Greek. All right? And in Hebrew, which I confess I don't recall what the word is in Hebrew, it doesn't have the same impact also. When you hear it in Latin, it does. So, just want to put that. He shall bruise your head. Other translations say crush. Crush your head. So when you see some images of the crucifix, sometimes you see at the bottom of the crucifix a skull and crossbones. That skull and crossbones is representative of Adam. That's supposed to be where Jesus died in Mount Calvary. The fathers said that was the tomb of Adam, the original Adam. That he was crucified over the tomb of Adam. So where the first Adam died, the second Adam died but rose again, which makes him greater than the first Adam. Also, you will see images of Our Lady, and I think there's one in our church. If you see images of Our Lady and she's standing on a serpent, that's this verse. Do I have that image of St. Charles still? I might. If I could, I don't want to look for it. But anyway, you can see there are statues of Our Lady standing on serpents. Sometimes the serpent has an apple in its mouth. Okay. The one at St. Gregory's that I knew when I was confirmed, she was, her image was that way. It's usually Our Lady of Grace that looks that way. Do you have a picture?
Oh, Miraculous Meadow is Our Lady of Grace.
But is she standing on a serpent?
Yeah.
Let me see.
The apple.
Yes. That's it. Yes, show everyone. That's great. This is an image teaching that Mary is the fulfillment of this first promise. She is the woman whose seed crushes the serpent's head. So in a sense, why then is she standing on the serpent? Because it's through her that Jesus will come and crush the serpent's head. Okay? This, by the way, is the first promise. This is the first covenant God is making with humankind. By pronouncing judgment onto the serpent, onto the devil, he is also promising the first coming of Jesus. The first promise of a redemption from sin. Okay? So when we look at all of the covenants that God has made, this is the first one, and this is where it's at. I do want to take some time. I want you to see this word is actually used in the Catechism. Catechism 410 says, after his fall, man was not abandoned by God. On the contrary, God calls him, in a mysterious way, heralds the coming victory over evil and his restoration from the fall. This passage in Genesis is called the Proto-Evangelium, the first announcement of the Messiah and Redeemer, of a battle between the serpent and the woman, and of the final victory of a descendant of hers. See that? We're going to come back to this section of the Catechism, so hang tight. I just wanted to directly point you, it's not something I'm making up, it's an actual word, and they actually use it in the Catechism. Okay?
Like putting puzzle pieces together.
Yeah. So next time you're at that cocktail party, you can say, oh yes, we learned about the Proto-Evangelium at Bible study, and they'll look at you and go, isn't that something that's in a microscope? It's like, no, the Proto-Evangelium. It means the first gospel. It's the pronouncement God made against the serpent by promising the coming of Jesus to undo the evil that has been afflicted onto the world. Not just themselves, but the whole world. Actually, the whole universe. But we'll get to that. Okay. All right. So, the consequences of Adam and Eve's disobedience. We said that there were these pronouncements, these judgments, these penances. We just read the one about the serpent. The basic consequence of the disobedience of Adam and Eve is what we call original sin. Original sin. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard about it, but I want to take some time to go over what exactly it is. Before I do that, you tell me, what do we mean by original sin? What is it?
The very first, original.
It's the first sin, yeah, okay.
We inherited
The disobedience.
We inherited from
from the first parents.
the first parent. What, yes? Of the loss of innocence, okay. All right. That's correct. It's something we've inherited. It is a loss of innocence. It is the first sin that our first parents made. Okay. What are the fruits of the original sin? Why are we being punished for something that they did?
Because we are the seed.
Because we belong,
We
we came from them.
Okay. Well, if I was in the garden, I wouldn't have eaten. It's the awareness of right and wrong. Yes, that's part of it. This is all correct. This is all good.
The act of disobedience, would that not be the original sin?
It is, yes. It's not the eating of the fruit. That's not the point. It's the fact that you disobey God. That's what the original sin is. By the way, the original sin is not having sex. I know my mother originally told me that's why Adam and Eve got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, is that they were having sex. She said that. And I remember I was perplexed by that. Because I said, well, my Sunday school teacher, that's not what they did. They were eating that fruit. They disobeyed God. That's why they got kicked out. Remember, what was the first commandment God told them to do?
multiply.
Be fruitful and multiply. So it's a misunderstanding of what place sex and sexuality has for her to think that way. Okay?
How old were you when you said this?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I was like 5th, 6th grade, so. Huh?
That's what she said.
Yeah, probably. She might have, but I doubt that. My mother was a very liberal-minded, very progressive type of woman. So anyway, be that as it may. Let's look, because there's a lot more to the original sin. than just simply our first parents disobeyed. And I want you to hear it from the catechism. This is again something that I don't want to just brush over. We're here, we might as well get the full treatment of this. This is a section called the original sin. Okay, this begins in paragraph 396 in the catechism. And it says, God created man in his image and established him in his friendship. So once again, we have to circle back to God's original intent for creation. It was out of love and his desire to share that love with his creation. So again, we have to keep that in mind when we're looking at the story of the fall. A spiritual creature, man, can live this friendship only in free submission to God. In other words, if God wanted robots, he could have created them. That's not what he wants. He wants his creation to freely love him. Period. Because if it's not, then it's not love. It's something else, but it's not love. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. The prohibition against eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil spells this out. For in the day you eat of it, you shall die. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil symbolically evokes the insurmountable limits that man, being a creature, must freely recognize and respect with trust. Did you hear that?
Yes.
So this is something that the serpent didn't tell Eve in all of this. You notice that?
Yes.
It wasn't that God was withholding something, being mean, or whatever. It was to say, you're a creature, I am your creator, you trust me, and you don't do this. Now guard and protect this relationship. And what did they do? Man is dependent on his creator and subject to the laws of creation and to the moral norms that govern the use of freedom. Man, tempted by the devil, let his trust in his creator die in his heart. Died in his heart first before he ever plucked the fruit. And, abusing his freedom, disobeyed God's command. This is what man's first sin consisted of. Okay? All subsequent sin would be disobedience towards God and lack of trust in his goodness. What did Sister Faustina teach us?
Trust in you.
Jesus, I
Trust in you.
Where do you think, why that? Because that was the original sin. We didn't trust God. So now guess what? We're learning to do that. Not my will, yours be done. I'm going to trust you, that you know better. See? So all of the stuff that we're dealing with now, it stems from what? All of the mistrust that Adam and Eve had. They didn't trust God. Okay? In that sin, man preferred, listen to this, himself to God. And by that very act, scorned him. When you value yourself, when you trust yourself more than you trust God, that's not good.
But this is been like even some churches they preach that, and say like, well, you are capable, you can do things, because God gives you the power to do it. And this is what we live in right now, the competition between man and woman. Woman wants to have the power, and I say like, well, you are stupid. It's kind of like we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
In this time,
Yeah.
We say like William Maluga, but we just said, and the actions is way up. It's
right.
Way from what we speak, and I think that's one of the most confusing right now. even when we go to church and say, God, we will, and then when we came out from church, we do ourselves, you know. And,
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying, you know, that they live are perfect, but we preach it, and we are way out
Mm-hmm.
of what we preach, you know. So,
You know, and at the same time, I'm thinking of, and I think it was St. Augustine that said this maxim. It may have been St. Ignatius of Loyola. He said, act as if everything depended on you, and pray as if everything depended on God.
Augustine.
Is that Augustine?
What does
I know it was a big guy.
What does that mean exactly?
It means that what you can do, you should do.
Okay.
And what you can't do, you leave to God and just leave it with God. Because there is a certain weakness of will and action that is the result of the fall, that you hear people pray, oh, God, do this for me. And what God is, and when there's no answer to it, people get upset. And it's like, well, if it's something that you can do, then by all means do it. You know, don't expect things to fall out of heaven. You know, God, I need a job, God, I need a job. But if you're not out looking for one, how do you expect to find one? Right? So it's like, you've got to do something. You've got to move. Okay? And then pray as if it all depended on God. So there is an inept action that man has by nature that wants to just kind of just say, let God deal with it all. And God's saying, no, you do it. You know, that kind of thing. And again, within this limits, and that's why Augustine said, do as if everything depended on you, and pray as if everything depended on God.
Let me ask you this, and tell me if I'm wrong. Is that true when you choose a wife and you pray for it, God doesn't have to do with it, and that's something like you choose, it's kind of like more like whatever you choose? Because sometimes, you know, we pray, God, put the woman, the right woman to
Right.
side.
Right.
And it's not the way it is, according to, you know, like people like
Yeah, that's a very good example. And I would say that if you are in a state of grace, if you are seeking